This is Ardfert today in County Kerry. This is for the Ortho Bros, 1500 years plus monastery, 484. Lovely.
The connection with the site is with St. Brendan, and he was born near Phoenix in 484. He was baptised at Weatherswell, or Tubber-na-Mult, just a few miles from here, so a strong connection to the area. And it's thought that it was St. Brendan that founded the first monastery on the site back in the early 6th century. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any structural remains from that early foundation, at least above ground, but we have a tangible link in the form of our Ogham stone, our Ogham stone. You can see it here in the corner on display. And the date we've been given for this would be late 5th, early 6th, so relative to when the first monastery was founded here. Now, because of the strong connection to St. Brendan, the site continued to grow and to evolve in religious importance. And in the 12th century in Ireland, we had a series of reforming church synods. And one main function of the synods at the time was to properly establish the Roman Catholic diocesan structure, so the structures that we still have in place here today. And at that time, it was decided that the church that was standing here was deemed to be large enough and important enough that it was selected above other churches in the area as being most suitable for cathedral purposes. So Ardfert at that time achieves cathedral status, and it becomes the centre of the diocese. Now, the same diocese today is known as the Diocese of Kerry, and the cathedral today, of course, is in Killarney, St. Mary's in Killarney. But historically, this was the diocesan centre up until the end of the 1500s, and then the effective Reformation, the failure of the Desmond Rebellion, the plantation of Munster. Then we'll see the cathedral going from being a Catholic cathedral to being a Protestant cathedral for a period of time, for about 70 years. Now, it just so happened then in 1661, the newly created Protestant Diocese of Ardfert merged with Limerick. So the seat of the Protestant bishop transferred to Limerick. Ardfert was demoted. The status here dropped from Protestant cathedral to Protestant parish church only. But we'll pop back to that. We'll circle back to that.
Was that when Cromwell and the likes instigating that?
Yeah, it was, well, a little bit after that. It certainly wouldn't have helped the situation.
No.
Yeah, it wouldn't have helped the situation. But just to give you a sense of the different buildings and the timeline, this is the main body of the cathedral itself. So it's this tall central building. I just apologise now, it's 18th century in date. Now, the model shows the cathedral with the roof, but when you step outside in a few minutes, you step directly into the nave of the cathedral, and you'll see today, of course, it's without a roof since the 17th century. But this part of the building, built in the early English Gothic style, you will see within it parts of two older churches. So a pre-Romanesque and a Romanesque. Now, part of the pre-Romanesque you can see through the glass. This will become a lot clearer to you when you walk out in a few minutes. But when you step outside and you look straight ahead, you will see there's almost a rectangular area ahead of you. You'll make out that the stones there are quite different, they're much larger. That rectangular area is the north wall of the first stone church. It was known as the Dove Lake. It would date to the 10th or 11th century. We know it was mentioned in the Annals of Innisfallen as having been struck by lightning back in 1046. Now, we have a little image here. It's an artist's impression, but it should give you a very good sense of what that church would have looked like. We have it just here. This would be the wall in question that remains today. We also know a lot about this church, the size, the scale, because when the site was excavated, all of the foundations for that particular building were uncovered. So they discovered a church that was about 18 metres in length, so likely one of the largest pre-Romanesque churches in the country at the time. And when you step outside in a few minutes, you will see little markers on the ground just to show you where the foundations were uncovered. So you'll see it was quite a large church indeed. Now, when that church was standing, we also had a round tower. Now, we have a little bit of it left. Now, when I say a little, not exaggeration.
Yeah,
So
right.
this is what we
Yeah.
have. So really just a semicircle of the base stones. I can show you on the model where it was located. So just here, you can see the model maker was feeling a bit generous that day. We don't have that much on the ground. Now we know that the tower stood until 1771. We're told that it collapsed because of a storm, and when it came down, they did the practical thing, they gathered the stone and they reused it. So it's all around us, houses in the village, walls around the graveyard, tombs and graves within the graveyard, so it hasn't gone very
We
far
noticed there
away.
was a lot of walled, farms on the way in, and I thought to myself, I wonder how much of that came from the monastery at some point.
You see, what we have architecturally today is just a fraction of what you would have seen if you arrived to Ardfert in around the year 1300.
That was its high point, kind of thing. Romanesque high point.
By the 15th century, it was really in its heyday, but
Yeah.
it very much became a flourishing Norman town by about the year 1300.
Yeah.
So you had a 13th century cathedral, you had the Fitzmaurice Castle, so the Fitzmaurices were just here next door. There would have been passages next to us. You had the Franciscan Friary, also 13th century. It was a walled town, we know this, because of records of grants being issued, but unfortunately we don't have anything above ground, we don't have any evidence, but we do have evidence of the grants being issued. There was a hospital here, a leper house, a marketplace, a pillory, all the trappings of a flourishing Norman town.
Yeah.
So all the stone walls around likely would have come from all of those now vanished structures,
So the friary, the Franciscan friary, is that red building over there, no?
Well, that's what's known as the parish room, so that would date to 1914. The friary, about a half a mile away. You can actually see the tower of the friary peeping through the trees.
Oh, yes.
But we can give you directions to that.
Yes, yeah. I saw the car park for it.
Yeah, well, you saw the car park. You actually have to park there and you have to walk the last 4 or 5 minutes, but it's worth the walk up.
Okay.
So it's standing.
Oh yeah.
Is it in use?
It's not in use. It's pretty much, it's a national monument. When I say it's not in use, it's not used as a burial ground either, not like the cathedral. I have a little file on it, and perhaps when you're on the way back out, we can have a little chat about it. You
Nice.
have more context then but it's definitely worth taking a trip over, as the Holy Well too. It might be a nice place for you to
very
go.
nice.
I
That'd be lovely.
can give you directions to that as well. So, just down at the west end of the cathedral, this is where you'll find part of a Romanesque church, and to give you a sense of what you'll see, that's the beautiful Hiberno Romanesque doorway that you'll find at the west end of the cathedral. Now the doorway itself is mid-12th century. The material above it, that's part of the Gothic phase, so this would be 13th century material or construction. But the doorway itself, mid-12th century, and you can see the lovely Romanesque rounded nature to the features. Now you can also see the lovely use of sandstone. So sandstone was a very popular choice at the time because it was a softer stone and it was just much easier to work with, much easier to achieve that high level of detail. But the disadvantage then is, of course, that it's prone to weathering and erosion. So in front of the west end of the cathedral, when you're down there in a few minutes, you will see that a new bank of yew trees were planted back in the 90s. Now, this idea of planting yew trees in graveyards is not new. This is a concept from, medieval times. They were planted deliberately to act as natural windbreakers to protect structures from high winds and storms. So the same concept put to good use here.
Because they were evergreen kind of thing.
Yes, yeah. Now they also, another advantage too is that they feature little red berries that were highly toxic to ruminants, so it discouraged local farmers from allowing their cattle and other animals from grazing in the churchyards before the churchyards were enclosed. You see, they weren't always as enclosed as they are now, so it kind of discouraged farmers from taking liberties and allowing their animals to roam within. But also here in Ardfert, the hope is that as these yew trees grow and mature, that they will act as a kind of a filter, and they will help to filter out a lot of the airborne salt and sand, because we're very close to the coast, we're close to Bannistrand, so just to help to slow down erosion in the future, just to save this beautiful doorway for as long as possible. Now the doorway is the only part of that Romanesque church that survives, but of course the material of that church wasn't just allowed to go to waste, it was also recycled. So when you walk around the 13th century cathedral itself, you will see pockets of this lovely red sandstone. And when you get to the next little church in the timeline or sequence, again, you will see a lot of the stone repurposed from this earlier Romanesque. So this church, mid-12th century, the next little church in the timeline, late 12th century. It's known as Temple na Hoiga, Church of the Blessed Virgin. Now we think it might have been constructed during the time of a bishop that came from a Cistercian background. So the Cistercians would have had a great affinity with Our Lady, and perhaps that's where this little church gets its name. Now, unfortunately, we only have the nave today, so the nave where the congregation would have gathered. Originally, there would have been a little chancel area just here at the east end. That's where the altar would have been, but that has vanished, and we don't know when it vanished. Why was the material taken away to be used for yet another building, another church? We just don't know. But this would have been a little Romanesque masterpiece in its own right when it was constructed in the late 12th century. So we have another small church then just at the edge of the site. It's known as Temple na Griffin, and we move forward in time. Just wait for a second now. So this little church would be mid-15th century in date, built in the style of the parish church. So these are the little churches that you see in all the older graveyards like Moher and places like that. Now with these little churches, little parish churches, they tended not to have the doorway in the west end. They tended to have the doorway in the south wall close to the west end. And one suggestion is this created space or accommodation for the priest at the rear of the church itself. So Havallen and Ballylongford, all of those old style parish churches that you'll see about. But in any case, we think this particular church may have been constructed for a particular purpose, and this would have been to take over from the main cathedral for a number of years, because in the mid-15th century the roof of the cathedral was completely remodelled. So they basically removed what would have been a very simple steep-pitched 13th century roof. So that was taken away completely. The walls were built up quite a lot, so when you step outside in a few minutes, when you look up high, you will see a level in the stone. You can see a level change up high. You can see exactly by how much they increased the height of the walls. On top of that, they created the battlements. So this may have had a defensive purpose. Certainly it did incorporate a wall walk. There were lookout points, but likely it was less about defence and more about the optics. It was just, the 15th century was a time of economic prosperity. This was very much a style of the period. It was really just to make the site look more imposing, more important. But you can imagine the amount of work involved. This was really a building site for a number of years. So that's why we think Temple na Griffin, perhaps aided by other small churches, may have taken over, you know, temporarily for a few years when this work was ongoing.
And how many monks would have lived here at the monastery over the years? I mean, you go, there are many layers of time here.
This is it, and they also had their own kind of hierarchy within the system as well. So you had the monks themselves, but then you also had a kind of a step down, and these would be people that chose to live a very disciplined and religious life, but were also married. And these religious members of society too, they were kind of living in the hinterland really, so they were kind of farming the land as well. So you had different kind of tiers as well, so difficult to put a figure on it. Wow. And of course the monasteries, the early monasteries, were in the Irish tradition. So the continental orders, as we call them, the Cistercians, the Benedictines, the Franciscans, the Dominicans, they didn't arrive to Ireland until the 12th century. So the Cistercians were the first to arrive. So Abbey here in Kerry would have been one of the early foundations.
Glenstall, I suppose, would be.
I'm not sure.
No, it's significantly later.
Yeah, that was belonged to a priest, and then he sold.
I think they're 1800s.
Yeah, but Abbey would have been the first continental foundation in County Kerry, but the Cistercians were the first to arrive. Then, you know, in the kind of by the mid-1200s, we have the Franciscans and the Dominicans. And just around here alone, you had the Franciscans here beside us, the Dominicans in Tralee, the Cistercians in Abbey, the Augustinians in Ballyduff, of course the Franciscans in Ballylongford too, and the Franciscans in Killarney.
So in many ways, these are Celtic monks.
Yes.
That kind of don't have a lot to do with Rome too much.
Absolutely nothing at all, being honest with you. The Irish adopted Christianity readily, but they very much adapted it to their own ways. And their the Brehon laws were still something that was very important to the people of Ireland even at that time. So there was a lovely...
The Breton laws.
The tribal laws of the communities.
The first kind of codified law system probably in Europe,
Wow.
the Brehon laws. There was very much, initially, there was an overlapping blending of the pagan and the Christian. So our holy wells, these were pagan sites of worship.
Yeah.
Before they were Christianized and they were given the names of saints. The crosses, you could see here, you can see it's hard to see it from this, but you can see the cross inscribed in this centre stone. So you have the Christian cross, and then you have the circle in the centre. So that is suggested it's the Christian cross and the sun god Lu. So there was a lovely blending of the two traditions.
A lot of people like online will be saying this shows that the Catholics are pagan. You're like,
no, but they were very clever. I think it was a way to bring Christianity
like
to the country.
evangelization,
But it was very seamless. It was bloodless, and it was just adopted and then adapted. So
it's incredible. You see, what I appreciate from your talk here is the layers of tradition. Because often now people think, oh, monasteries, they go all the way back to the 6th century and they're kind of monolithic structures that haven't ever changed. And yet what I'm hearing from you is there's layers upon layers of tradition here, which even predates Christianity.
Yes.
Holy site, perhaps, that predates Christianity.
We're not sure if this particular site was in use before it became a monastery. There is a legend that St. Brendan had intended to construct the monastery about a kilometre further north. It is the highest point of the parish, Killickle, and that's a Bronze Age site and a ceremonial site. So the legend was, of course, that St. Brendan was to have built a monastery there, but it said that a dove came along and picked up the plans in his beak, as they do, and flew over here and dropped it where we are.
The plans.
The plans. So a little bit of
architectural plans.
Yes, yeah. I think perhaps the reasoning that this site was picked was likely a very practical one. We are on a height, which was always an advantage. There's a quarry at the foot of the hill. There was quite a sizable river just at the foot of the hill as well. Of course, water was important to move material and also, for mixing mortar and all sorts of practical needs. And there was likely quite a lot of woodland, so they had all the materials that they needed right here on the spot. The sandstone did travel a little bit further, but the limestone was available just at the quarry at the bottom of the hill. So I'd say that's probably why they chose this particular site. But you're right, there's a lot of different layers of history.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
So, well, I let you...
This is the 13th century grave slab of a bishop. It's very well preserved. Here's another one. 13th, early 14th century.
the hand pointing up to God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an angel on the side. It's an angel there. There's the wings.
Yeah. See all these layers of history. Here it says that the disputed bishopric, we start seeing the Latin influence and inevitable power games between different religious groups, the Franciscans, the Dominicans, the Cistercians, etc., all vying for control of this holy Celtic site. Spectacular. So one level is where the original roof was, and then they added more. But fascinating how there's layers of tradition in this place, from the early Celts, 5th, 6th century, to the Romans and the Roman traditions, to the Protestants, to delicate balance with the locals, to be in a museum today.